Is a book bad if it's predictable? Yeah? Am I only joking? I think that's actually a really difficult question to answer, and I'm the one who asked it, so I'm doing this to myself. But I do read a lot. That's kind of why this channel exists. And so I put myself on a mission to get to the bottom of this. At first, I tried to think of all the books that I hated that were predictable, and then all the books that I liked that were predictable, because I was kind of hoping there would be a landslide on one side or the other, but that wasn't to be. There were, annoyingly, a lot in each category, which means that answering this question is not going to be simple. I've realised that saying that a book that is predictable is bad just can't be true, because I've enjoyed stories where I've predicted twists or guessed the ending. It's just not as obvious as reading a book that's poorly written and going, yeah, that's bad. This is a much more complex conundrum that we are going to figure out right here, right now. My name is Lauren Koster, and welcome back to my library. So, is a book bad if it's predictable? To answer this, I think we actually have to answer a different question first. I know, 2 questions. Everybody lock in. And that question is, why is the book predictable? Sometimes authors write their books somewhat predictably on purpose. As an avid fantasy reader, I can pretty confidently say that this happens quite a lot within the fantasy space. I actually got the idea for this video because I just finished reading Bound by Sable Sorensen, and I will get into that and my thoughts on the fantasy genre as a whole in just a second. But there's also predictability in other genres too. And planes above this forest. For example, when you pick up a romance book that very clearly promises a happy ending, you kind of know that the characters are going to end up together. You don't know how they end up together, why they end up together, and there will most likely be twists, turns, and the occasional tragedy along the way. But you know you will be getting that crumb of exquisite serotonin, at the very least, on the last page. I suppose, in a way, you could argue that crime novels, specifically detective novels and murder mysteries like the work of Anne Cleeves, for example, do have a sense of predictability to them as well. Like with romance novels, you know that by the end of the book, the detective will have solved the crime. Now, that doesn't stop you in any way from being swept up in the mystery and intrigue of the investigation or by the characters themselves, and it doesn't ruin the shock value when the villain or perpetrator is finally revealed. I mean, I watched Scooby-Doo religiously as a child. Can you tell? Each episode had almost the exact same plot structure, and I ate that shit up every time. But what if we don't just have a vague understanding of what the ending will be? What if we know what the ending will be? At least to some degree. All right. Twist my arm. Let's talk about fantasy, shall we? Hold on. Who did this to you? Now, I know that other genres have tropes that dedicated readers will notice pop up time and time again. For example, in horror franchises like Scream, if you don't see a person die on screen, they're not dead. Trust me on that. I mean, sorry for spoiling it for anyone who didn't know that, but if I don't see a body, I don't believe it. Now, I would consider myself somewhat of a fantasy connoisseur these days, yes. And so when I see certain tropes appear in the book that I'm reading, I already have a fairly good idea on how they're going to pan out. Let's take Bound as an example. Bound is the story of Merrin Cooper, a commoner whose sister is captured by an evil race known as the Siphons. Merrin enlists in the army because she thinks it will let her go to the front lines in Siphon territory where she can then look for her sister. However, during her initiation, she accidentally bonds with one of the infamous dire wolves and becomes one of the bonded, an elite group of warriors who fight with their wolves for the king. I enjoyed this book, even though I had a fairly good idea where it was going. It scratched the fantasy itch if you will. Meryn as a character was hot-headed and naive, which was occasionally irritating, but her emotional journey was believable and therefore her failings were believable too. Some of the other characters were fairly well-rounded as well, and I thought the story was fairly well-paced. Meryn is in a pack where their strength is strategy, but the strategy she uses for most of the book is simply trying not to die painfully, which, I mean, fair enough. The narrative voice, or I guess Meryn's voice, is a little simplistic or YA in nature. There's also a lot of like italicized "what the hell did he just say?" or "he'd be hot if he wasn't trying to kill me." I mean, it didn't necessarily take me out of the story, it just reminded me that what I'm reading is not necessarily a literary masterpiece. But there were a few descriptions of Meryn's emotions that I thought were really well framed. Meryn's bonded wolf, Anassa, is sassy and teaches her some lessons, which as the reader is quite satisfying and also very amusing. I do want to see more of the wolves going forwards. Right now, I feel like you could swap them out with the dragons from Fourth Wing and you wouldn't notice. I mean, physically, you would notice one's a fluffy dog and one is a giant lizard with wings, but more their like temperament and lore. Like, I want to know more about them as an individual species, not just like a voice in Meryn's head. And similarly, while the world building isn't particularly unique, I look forward to seeing how it's expanded upon in the next installment. We briefly went into Siphon territory in book 1, but I have a feeling we're gonna spend some time there in book 2. I rated this book, well, it says on Goodreads 3 stars, but I wanted to give it 3.5, but I swear that app has not been updated in like a million years. I don't know about you guys, but I find ranking books really difficult because I don't know exactly what I'm ranking them on. Like, am I ranking it on the story itself? Am I ranking it on the writing quality? Or is it just vibes? Because the vibes of this book were great, but I can't be giving it 5 stars. At the very beginning of the book, we meet Lee, Meryn's partner, who is blonde. Yeah, I already knew that he wasn't the main love interest, though he lasted a lot longer than I thought he would. Also, he calls her kitten. Meow. I was really glad when the authors acknowledged how icky that is because it literally made my skin crawl. However, while I knew that Lee obviously was an endgame, I didn't guess the first Lee twist. I didn't guess that he was Prince Killian. Although, in my defense, I actually forgot that there was a royal family in this book because I was so distracted by Meryn arguing with her wolf. So I'm gonna allow myself that. But this is the perfect example that shows that including tropes doesn't necessarily mean the entire book is predictable. We see other tropes in this book too, smaller ones like who did this to you, different hair colours, there only being one bed at the inn, to more large-scale ones like lovers to enemies and enemies to lovers. Golden Boy is actually a evil siphon-possessed thing. And surprise, the scowling, tall, dark and handsome, mysterious guy is actually her enemy, but oh wait, they're essentially fated mates and he's been looking out for her this whole time. Right. We have elite warriors, the mean instructor, training montages, people refusing to tell her things. Oh wait, there's a blood curse, which means they can't give her information. Yes. I am not here to train. Proceeds to train. I am not the missing princess. Is the missing princess. You get the gist. I think tropes are kind of the mini equivalent of rereading your favorite book or rewatching your favorite movie. The amount of times I have rewatched Maze Runner is concerning at this point. You know exactly what's gonna happen, but it hits every damn time. And yet there's also space for the unpredictable things to happen around them. I'm not saying that everyone loves every trope by any means, but if I'm seeing Grumpy and Sunshine describing a book, I'm at least gonna read the blurb. I will say that I think we have gone a little bit too far with tropes, as in people are using them to write books just so they can put enemies to lovers, TikTok best-selling fantasy, yum yum wow in the description on Amazon when the characters only mildly disliking each other for the first 2 chapters and then they're just going at it. But if you take capitalism out of the equation, tropes in essence are a comfort, something familiar that you can settle into like a cozy armchair. As I said, there is enough going on in Diabound that it kept me really engaged. Unfortunately, I did guess some of the main twists really early on in the book, which weren't supposed to be tropes, and one of my biggest pet peeves as a reader is knowing something that the character doesn't know when we're in their first person present tense point of view, and when it's also very obvious that the reader was not supposed to guess that particular twist. A B! This actually happened again when I was reading 5 Survive by Holly Jackson. Now hold your horses. I love Holly Jackson, okay? The reappearance of Rachel Price is hands down one of my favourite books of all time. That being said, 5 Survive is on the very cusp of being predictable by accident and being predictable on purpose. This book is about 6 teenagers who go on holiday in an RV in America, get lost, and have their tyres shot out by a sniper. Just your casual American summer, I guess. The sniper demands that the person inside the RV with the big secret needs to come outside and tell the world the truth. This is a great setup and a very high-stakes mystery. The characters are a little bit obvious, as in kind of cliche, like you've got the sweet girl, the overachiever, the alternative, my mom's dead character. And while we're speaking about characters, essentially there's this legal case that's going on and more of the details around it kind of gets revealed as the story continues. The lawyer on this case is the mother of 2 of the characters, and one of the characters in the RV, the person whose point of view we're reading, is the witness against this mob-esque family. Fine. However, one of the characters in the RV, named Arthur, is the only friend who has joined the group recently, and he's the one giving directions when they get lost. That was me sitting there like, surely it can't be that obvious. I mean, he's clearly involved, right? Right? He is involved. Yeah. And it comes as this kind of big reveal fairly late in the book, even though I'd known it from like chapter 2. On the other hand, though, there were loads of other twists that I never saw coming in classic Holly Jackson fashion. There's the first reveal where Red tells everyone that she is the witness, but then we get a second reveal, which is that Red lied and was paid to lie by the lawyer mother. Oh. And as the reader, we have been in her head the entire time, so she's lied to us as well. I know. Oh, I love an unreliable narrator, don't you? Red never witnessed a thing. She just needs the money that the lawyer was going to give her to essentially perjure herself on the stand. Inject that into my veins. Those twists weren't predictable, but Arthur being involved in the attack was, and it wasn't supposed to be. Which leads me on to the second reason why a book could be predictable, which is that when a book is predictable by accident, a part of me dies inside. I will admit that if you're a big fan of a genre, you may find books in that genre a lot more predictable than, say, a person who is reading that genre for the first time. So I am very much keeping that in mind while we go through this section. I do think that if anyone, even someone who has never read the genre, can predict what happens in a book, then it's not looking good, bruv. Now, again, I'm coming at this argument as someone who reads a lot of fantasy, and I therefore know what to look for in this genre, and it's becoming increasingly hard to shock me at this point. Honorable shout out to Metal Slinger. I thought this was like a really basic romantasy with very simple writing, but the twist had me gagged. But accidental predictability happens across all genres, sadly. There is a big difference between authors who choose a plot structure because they know it's something that we've seen before, versus an author who writes a story that is so simple or adheres so closely to the expectations of that genre that the plot just becomes mind-numbing. Now, I'm not going to sit here and list all the books that I thought were horrifyingly predictable or were written just to tick off a checklist of buzzwords for a publishing house, because I just don't believe in tearing down creatives, even if their work sucks. But I have read multiple books where the author has framed something as a twist and we, as the reader, figured it out 100 pages ago. It simultaneously pisses me off that I have wasted so much time and money on that book and that book was able to be published at all. Well, I also just end up pitying the author because they really thought they did something with their book and it's not doing what they thought it was doing. And to have someone say that about your work as an author is something that terrifies me to my core. Sometimes a book is accidentally predictable because the writing is simply bland, lazy, awful, essentially poo. But in a few very specific cases, a book is also accidentally predictable because the author has crossed the line from being inspired by another book to outright plagiarizing it. I do not think there is a problem if you read a book and love it so much that you decide to write a book that is very similar to it because you just love the feeling that it gives you or those characters and just want to see more of it. There is a problem when you take the plot, characters, or literal lines from someone else's book and claim them as your own, while also not acknowledging that they are someone else's work. There is a lot of discourse online about this at the moment, about a certain author who is getting major book and TV deals, even though her novel is essentially someone else's book with different names, terrible grammar, and no emotional or political depth whatsoever. Not only did it read like a first draft that had never crossed an editor's desk, I also immediately went, hang on a minute, I think I've seen this book before. And I like the ending, but I don't like that you've copied it. It has been really unfair to witness this person's rise to fame. She clearly has a very good marketing team and a publicist who is telling her not to comment on this, which I think is really a bad call. I'm glad that other readers have started to realize what she's done, intentionally or not. I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that she didn't set out with the goal of ripping off someone else's book, but she did it nonetheless. And I'm glad that it's being debated within the bookish community because it hopefully means that it will not happen again, but who knows? Again, this is just my opinion. If it has purposefully included predictable elements within a well-crafted story, I would say no, the book is not bad. But if it's entirely unintentionally predictable, then I would say yes, it is bad. What was the point of writing it? And how do I refund time as well as money after hate reading this book? This was actually a really fun debate. Let me know in the comments what you think. Does predictability make a book bad or not? Please do subscribe and I will see you in my next video. Bye!